Hello and welcome to Activating Magic. I'm your host, Darla Ledoux, here with Heather Jones. Heather, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about family constellations. And just a little background, we met through an online community. And, as I heard you speak about what you do and your passion for serving people, I really resonated. I know you bring the spiritual and the practical together to really help people move forward and change their lives, and especially through ancestral work. So, what brought you to this, beautiful world of coaching and transformation?
Like what actually brought me to it?
Yeah.
Holy smokes. That feels like such a big question. Like I feel like personal development and this world has there's been this like slow rollout of progression. I would say it started for me back in 2006 was the first time I did anything personal development. It wasn't in the development in like say with energies. It was more like personal development workshops. And I really started that because like I would have been in the lowest point of my life back in 2006. So I had just come off of I had just discovered that my longtime boyfriend actually, I was the other woman inside of the relationship, and I didn't know about it until much later. And so we had a whole life together, and I didn't know about it. And so that was quite devastating. And then, as well, came off of out of a job position where I was experiencing a lot of sexual abuse. And so I was at a stage in my life where those two things were coming to an end, and I just didn't know where to go or where to turn. And it was actually one of the things my family said, like, you got to go work on you. And so that started it way back then. Yeah, and then I kind of was like pacing along with that. And then I started getting into actual energetic healing, like family lineage healing, probably around like the 2012 mark. And it's like every time I engaged in some form of personal development for myself, whether it be courses and workshops or whether it is the energetic field as far as family constellations or other modalities, I just noticed myself grow a little bit more every time. And it's like when I looked back and saw how far I come, it turned into this commitment to myself just to keep going. Like every opportunity I have to learn something, I'm gonna do it and learn it.
Mm. Wow. I have, big part of my story is a relationship ending because of infidelity. So
Yeah.
I know the pain of that, and
Yeah.
it sounds quite dramatic. And your family actually told you to work on you. And that's interesting. What did they have a background in personal development, or they just were super concerned about you, or what do you feel about that?
So I think that it was probably largely because they were concerned. So they had done a lot of work before me.
Okay.
And through my relationship with this man, is that they had noticed things that intuitively I feel like maybe I knew but didn't listen to it. Well,
Mm,
that's exactly true. And when I broke it all down, is like as far as like the intuition part, is that I didn't have enough belief in myself to listen to my intuition. And
mm,
so it's like if I listened to my intuition on it and if what my parents or my family was saying was true about who he was, then that meant something about me. That it's that's he I deserved that, or it meant something about how I saw
mm,
myself or how he saw me. And so it was such a big risk for me to listen to my intuition at that time. And so in the meantime, my family is like, she needs like just to find herself again because I lost myself so much in the relationship. And so I really just stepped in on their advice. And it was probably like I want to say about two courses in before I stepped in for me.
mm. Yeah, that makes a difference,
Yeah.
the personal commitment. So we can learn things about ourselves and grow and become happier and more free. And then there's making it into a business or saying, like, this is my calling. I remember the moment that I first learned I could transform something in my life. And I thought, I want to do this with my life. I didn't know how. It took me a long time to figure it out. But there was this sense of, I wish everybody knew this.
Yeah.
How did you decide to make this a business?
Well, so in working with the personal development company, so I first did the courses and then I was employed by the company. And then years later, the company became for sale. And so I had this slow progression from working in the office staff to training as a facilitator and training as a life coach. And every step I made moving forward, I felt so much more grounded in who I was. And I could see the impact. I could see how I was like the vessel of support for the people that I was in front of. And
Mm,
it really the people who I was standing in front of, they actually through their growth inspired me to really just step into more of who I really felt I was. Because
mm,
if I could make this impact, if they can take the lessons from me or like just hear the stories and learn from me and do something with it, then I can continue to do that for more and more. So like their growth really inspired me just to continue stepping in.
mm. I love that. It makes me think about, I talk about retreats.
Yeah,
I feel the process of leading retreat is like that for people. When
yeah.
you see the difference it's so motivating to keep going and to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so motivating. Like, and even like with retreats, like the connection that you have and create with people when it's like you go through like what I call the thick and thin, which is what a lot of those retreats produce. It's like every conversation, it's like it just gets rooted in those experiences where you just create like so much support.
How do you define the thick and thin?
The thick and thin in like this context of
Yeah.
retreats, it's facing yourself.
Mm,
It's meeting yourself, right? Because it's like I think one of the scariest things we can do is meet ourselves in any form of work, right? So me meeting myself was accepting and acknowledging that I saw the signs that he was cheating on me. I didn't see the signs that I was the other woman, because I didn't know that until many years
yeah.
later. But I saw so many signs on the relationship not working. So the thick and the thin is that moment when I just sit with myself and I'm honest and I'm like, I knew that. I knew that. And I didn't listen. And why didn't I listen? So the meeting myself is like, I didn't listen because if that were true, then it would have meant something about me. I would have made a story up about me as to why he was doing it to me. And I didn't want to meet that back then. So when I've had these workshops and even retreats with community, and I can just sit in the thick and thin of it and acknowledge that that's where I was in my life back then, and that's okay. But it is this meeting of myself that it's like with that I would say wholeheartedly is the thick and the thin.
I love that. I love the way you describe that. Why do you think people don't want to meet themselves?
Well, I can tell you why I didn't want to meet myself. And I don't know what others' answers are as to that. I didn't want to meet myself because it would reaffirm the story that I had ingrained in me from so young, from my mom and even her mom, that I wasn't good enough.
Mm,
And so if I would have acknowledged it, and the fact is that I didn't acknowledge it back then because I wasn't strong enough to have another message about myself being that I wasn't good enough. And so, and other people, it's going to be a part of their story. It's going to be that reoccurring message that they don't want to face again or one more time. That is like why they wouldn't want to meet themselves. And it
mm,
takes a level of courage to come to that place and actual trust as well, trust in yourself that no matter what it is you uncover in this experience, that you can handle it.
mm. Wow, that's powerful. Yeah, we don't want to see that story one more time.
Exactly. That's
The one
exactly
that's
it.
going to break us or something.
Yeah. Did you experience yourself in that when you were talking about one of your relationships and infidelity?
Mm, yeah, absolutely. I've been married twice and I stayed, I know at least in part because I didn't want to fail again, right? It's
Right.
like, okay, the first time I married the
Right.
wrong person, I can make a story about that and that sounds really good. But twice, there's
Right.
definitely a problem. Yeah,
Right. And so then that would have been a part of you meeting yourself is coming to that
exactly.
reality. And then in the meeting of ourselves, we get to detach the story
Yeah.
because we make up a story about it. So for me, it was about that I'm not good enough. And here's the evidence of why. And for you, it sounds like it was a message about failure. And so,
Yes.
in that meeting ourselves, in that moment of honesty, is that we have that experience. And then the next step is to break apart that story because we created that story for survival at one point in our life. We created
Mhm.
it to protect us. And the story doesn't protect us anymore. And instead, the story limits us.
I love that. So I totally know what that means. If someone is listening and they don't know yet what it means that the story, they created it to protect themselves.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I can. So I can share my story and the listeners can see if they can relate it to their life. And so I had a story running that I wasn't good enough. And if I believed that my partner was cheating on me or if I was the other woman, I would need to face that again. And that so it limited my success. It limited my ability to move forward and create in my life. So what happened is my parents, they're wonderful parents. They did the best they could, and my parents worked really hard at their marriage. My dad left 3 times throughout my growing or my upbringing, and every time my mom uh, she changed. And what I looked at is like I wanted to make her happy so badly. And so I would always put in extra effort to like clean or tell jokes or to like look after my brother. Sometimes it was like when I was older, I was running around with him and driving him places. And I was really trying to be good enough to in order to make my mom happy the way that my dad did. But
Mm,
every time my dad came back, and then she was happy. She wasn't happy when it was me doing those things. So for my own survival, and so for my own protection, is that I adapted this story that I wasn't good enough, really to make my mom happy, but I stopped at I just wasn't good enough. And
mhm,
so it was like my dad could be good enough in that situation. It wasn't my job to make my mom happy. So at that time, that was a good belief in order for my own protection to not feel like a failure. And what happened is that belief carried forward into my entire life, where every time I faced something, I would rub up against that. And then it would also hold me back in ways for me to step in and be myself. And even if you look at the career choice that I have right now, if I allowed that to continue to bump up, like it continue to bump up against it, I wouldn't be in this career that I'm in now, right?
mhm,
And so that's an example of like at some time, whatever that belief is, like when you face yourself, when you meet yourself, whatever that belief is that you meet, some point is that that belief served you. Some at some point it was protecting you from something else. And now that story is likely not true. And it's our turn. So when we do our work is that we separate ourselves from those stories.
mhm. Beautiful. So in 2012, you brought in Constellations work. Can you tell people what that is in a basic level? And we'll dive in deeper to how it helps people, but just orient people. And maybe I should start, Heather, by saying I learned about Constellations work So years ago, there was a woman in one of my programs who did it, and I like loosely knew what it was. And then I think I saw it on Netflix, right?
Yeah.
A couple years ago. And I tracked down a family constellations practitioner. I was living in Austin, and I guess it was 3, 4 years ago now. And she came in and did a workshop for one of my retreats. And the reason I was interested in it is this idea that we can kind of feel the energy of someone we've never met. And I
Yeah.
think that really helps open up people's magic. And so then I went on and I did my own constellation, and maybe that'll come back around later, but it was really, really helpful. I went with a friend. It was super helpful for her. So talk a little bit about what it is and how you got drawn to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what really started the draw to it for me actually was astrology. So I had done a reading recently, and so the lady who had done the reading for me also does family constellations. And so she said, this is something that we could heal in family constellations. And so she introduced me to what it was. So in 2012 was really my first exposure to it. I later became trained in it, but my draw was inside of my astrological chart is it showed things from past lives for myself, and then as well as things in my family lineage that could be supported through some healing. And so my draw was really about continual, like my next level of healing.
Mhm.
So do you want me to share about really like some people may not know what family constellations
Yeah,
is?
give a basic overview of how it
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, I definitely will. Thank you. So how family constellations works is that well, to start off is that we all have a physical body and we all have energy bodies, right? And so what happens is that our physical body is that when we are, say, what we call a representative or a resonator, right? And so what it is, it's all about being able to feel people's energy or someone's energy down the family line. And so when you're a resonator, you could be asked to resonate for somebody who isn't even like a part of your family, like you don't know them, like you had said there, Darla. And so, because we all have energy bodies and physical bodies, is what actually happens is that through calling in of like the ancestors and guides and spirits to bring us knowledge, is they share inside of our energy body what it is, and then our physical body interprets what that feeling and experience is. Is how basically it works. And so sometimes you can go in and you can feel any number of things, but it is what you're feeling in your physical body is a response to how your energy body is being given a message from the ancestors or spirits that we've called in the process. And so, how it would work is that someone would choose to do what I call a family healing session. And so, they might come to me and say they want to heal like 4 or 5 things about themselves. So, I can give you an example. One client came and said that they want to heal, that they're constantly working and they're constantly giving out to their family. And it's like they, number one, don't have an off switch, but number two is that their family has gotten used to them not having an off switch. And so they're the financial contributors completely for the family, right? And so when we went in and put resonators inside of the space, which we call the knowing field, is that these resonators started to feel certain experiences from her lineage. And so, yeah, just like experiences what her lineage was experiencing. So one of them went in and started to experience extreme hunger.
Mhm.
And when we followed it back, is like through being a resonator, is we followed it back to a famine where her ancestors were in a famine at one time and there was no work. And there was no food, like that they couldn't even support themselves. And so what ended up happening is that what we do know, and I can share about the actual science and research, is that what happens with our ancestors is passed down to us biologically. And
Mhm.
so from that experience of the famine, is that her family just got busy working. They just
Mhm.
got busy working and they even turned off their emotions because if they faced their emotions, they had to face the family members that didn't make it through the famine. And so here she is now 4 generations later, and it's like it's her job to produce this huge income for the family and continuing to work super hard in order to continue to provide. And so when we went back and addressed what happened in her lineage, is that it's almost like she had this full on fast forward switch where we could dial it back to this switch that we would call play. So it didn't have to be so fast and hyper focused, right? And so that's kind of an example of how it works. Like that's the essence of it, but you feel from your energy body, it gets interpreted into your physical body, and then you just share what it is you're feeling.
Mm. So in my experience, it was like someone was me, and I think we knew who was me, but
Yeah,
everybody else, they didn't even tell them who they were,
right.
right? So there's like a transmission or the, the hand on the shoulder is what I experienced. So there's all
Yeah.
these people, to dumb it down. In my experience, it was a lot of people who were volunteers who were coming for the experience, coming to serve whoever I paid for the session, whoever was getting the session. And those are the resonators that you're talking about. And so they
Yeah.
get assigned roles.
They get assigned roles. And so I'm the only one who knows what each resonator is. And based on what it is that they say, is that whatever role they're assigned is then we start to learn where really the problem is, or we want to call it an entanglement rather than a problem. In family constellations, it's an entanglement. And so then, depending on which resonator feels it, that's where we go to create that healing. And then let's say let's say we have you in as the person who paid for the constellation. Then we might put your mom in, your grandma in, great grandma in, great great grandma in, right? And so we have all these resonators that could be in this space. And let's say it's where great great grandma starts experiencing these symptoms. So then we would start to put more things in to help and support great great grandma. And then we would move the healing forward to grandma, then or to
Mm,
grandma, then mom, and then back to you at the center. And so where the point is of the trauma is we heal it right there, and then energetically and physically inside of the constellation, that healing moves forward.
mm.
Mhm.
What are some of the things you've seen where it's kind of wild that something that happened so long ago is being repeated?
Oh my goodness, I think the wildest thing that I've experienced is I've have a client who's actually going blind. Um,
Mm,
And so she came, and so we did end up doing, we are at one of a process of constellations right now for her. And so what ended up happening is, so what we know medically is that what is going on with her shouldn't technically be happening. It doesn't kind of fit a medical file.
mm,
Um, she's even had corrective surgeries. It's like one of these things that it's like if it happens to you once, it's like holy fluke medically, right? But then it
uh-huh.
happens again and again and again inside this woman with her sight. And so, and then even when they correct the one issue, something else with her sight happens. And so
Mm,
it's really bold what's going on with her and her vision. We went back in the family line, and we end up finding is that I believe we were down the maternal line, and every like female in the line kept saying, I don't want to look at it. I can't
mm,
see it. And the resonators were like blocking their eyes, or they were turning their back
wow.
to what was happening. And so what we did to bring healing is that we needed to look at it. We needed to heal it and then acknowledge all of this was happening, and then we brought the healing forward. And so one of the things with her specifically is then the following week she was back to her specialist's appointment, and the specialist had already reported her test results were improving and her eyesight was improving. And
Mm,
we were like 3, 4 days after the constellations.
wow.
And so it's like and this is science now. This is
Mm,
what you would call epigenetics, right? And so epigenetics is when our bodies or next generations respond to differently to how the DNA is. So the DNA can stay the same, but how we respond to it is differently. And so
Mm.
in this family, and it wasn't just her with the challenge with eyesight, it was
Right.
actually also her brother. And
Mm.
so that's how we even know so strongly that this is something that's in the lineage rather than something that is like this fluke. Anything that is like fluke
Yeah.
medically, it's like go have a look in your lineage, see what's
Mm.
going on back there. And there's lots of modalities to do that in. Constellations is a
Yeah.
really great one to play it out in.
With the example, was there a particular thing they weren't wanting to look at, or was
Yes,
it just a habit?
it was a very particular thing happening inside of the constellation that the family did not want to see and look at. And so it's not in this case, rather than disclosing the whole experience,
Sure.
I can give you a different example that would be relevant. It could be a miscarriage. It could be that they don't want to look at. It could be even an abortion. It could be like following rules of the church. It could be anything that can
Mhm.
create that experience that's
Mhm.
happening. But it was a very specific experience they didn't want to look at.
Got
And
it.
it was um we ended up going 3 generations with this same experience and addressed it in all three. And then it just moved and flowed forward back to the original healer at the very end.
Do you find that it's like the same experience repeats in each generation, or they're just holding the energy of it?
Oh, I see what you're saying. I started to think no, but it is both, Darla. So it is
Okay.
family specific. So sometimes it's exactly the same thing, or it's the energy that repeats, but it's now being manifested differently with the different generations.
Clear.
Yeah.
Okay. So, tell me how you do this work. Like, how are people finding you? How did people engage your services?
So how people typically find me is I do a lot of like what do you call it? Just referrals. And then once a month I also have through online where people find me, just like either my website or through Facebook. I have a Facebook group that has a bunch of people in it. What I do is right now I'm really at a lot of the education stage about what this process is.
Mhm.
And so I do have a master class to support people in learning and looking to be like, this is what's going on for me. Is this mine? Is this my experience? And so in that master class, that's the goal. Like, Darla, have you ever had the experience before where you're like, I'm dealing with this emotion or this feeling in my body, but I don't know where this came from?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's an indication that you are carrying energy from your family. And so inside of this masterclass, I do talk about that and share other insights, as well as share questions about that they can look at for their family to see if family constellations is a fit for them.
Awesome. We'll definitely share how you can find that below this video, below this conversation. Um, Gosh, you said something that I haven't heard before. Thank you for explaining what constellations are because I think different people like relate to it differently. And I've never heard this before. That the ancestors and guides are giving the message within our energy field.
Yeah.
I don't think I've had that explained in any way before. As a facilitator, how do you experience that? Like, do you feel their presence? Do you see or know they're there? Or is it more of a methodology and a trusting and
So I would say that it is both for me, and for others, it could be more about the foundation. And so How this was all created originally was Bert Hellinger, who created this process. He learns it from a native tribe where they use this inside of their tribe to heal their ancestors. And so then he duplicated it so we could work with it ourselves. And so at the beginning, what I do at the beginning before I open any session is I have like what will be like a meditation and a grounding process for me, and then I call in whoever I'm doing for like longs. I invite in their ancestors and their guides to come and be a support. And so for me is that I get one of my gifts is I get these psychic hits or intuitive or messages that come through for me sometimes. So that's something that is separate as a constellation facilitator. You don't need to have that experience
Mhm.
in order, because when you lay the foundation of this process, when you follow the order, the energy and the facts of every client, and you call in the ancestors, is that is what's created
Mhm.
in that moment. And I'm describing my experience of it. And so it's like I can feel my energy field, and then I feel it inside my physical body, where some don't necessarily feel what's happening around them energetically or acknowledge that it's
Mhm.
what they're feeling energetically.
Mhm. Yeah, the experience I had there, it didn't feel as spiritual, I guess I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
let
I
me
don't know
ask
how it
you.
cannot be, but
Right. Let me ask you this, Darla. Have you
Um,
ever walked into a room and know you walked in on something, but you don't know what it is? Like you can
mhm.
just feel something's off.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
so that's your energy field communicating with your physical body.
Mhm.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
And so it's like we're just you kind of walk in and you're like, okay, I don't know what's going on, but I'm getting back out of this room as quick as I can, or I'm telling some joke to change the energy. That's an example, is that this intuitiveness about us is that we do all have it. Even in my lowest moment in life, when I was with my ex, and I kind of had this nudging that someone's not nothing something wasn't right, but I didn't learn yet to listen to it. And so,
Mhm.
one of the gifts of being a resonator with family constellations is you get really immediate responses as to how you can learn to listen to yourself in that way. Because what I have learned is that we're all different and unique as far as how we feel energy and how we interpret energy. And so when you're a resonator, is like when you think about being a weekend, where all you're doing all weekend is paying attention or just sensing in your body and expressing that. And then you get to see how that was supportive to the process or worked in the process. So you
Mhm.
actually start to do this. I do this inner class of myself of how can I listen to my body, or how is my body communicating with me, so that I can then communicate it with the facilitator that was leading at that time.
Mhm.
Right.
So the
And so,
process of doing that in service of someone else where you're really not attached, like you don't have a story about it because it's not yours,
right.
that helps develop intuition.
Definitely does. Yeah. And as a facilitator, is that there's certain messages that I know. And so, for example, if it's down a maternal line, it will follow a part of the body, like a side of the body. If it's the masculine
Mhm.
line, it follows the other side of the body. And so, based on what that resonator is feeling, like they could tell me that my right shoulder is feeling something. Well, that's a message for me as to where the guides are directing me, right? And
Mhm.
that comes in my training. And so when you start to see the evidence of that, so beliefs are just thoughts and ideas that we deem to be true. And so when you're in a group like that for, like, say, a weekend, and you collect more and more evidence that your intuition and that you're hearing your body or you're communicating with your body is working, then you start to
Mhm.
have confidence in a skill that we all have.
So good.
Yeah.
Love it. Um, Goodness. So how would you tie So I'm trained as a coach. I've been trained in various energy modalities.
Hmm.
Obviously, I train coaches to be retreat leaders. I do a lot of skills training, and I have, my own philosophies about transformation. you went through all of the personal development seminars. I loved it so much that you now bought the company.
Yeah.
And then you added constellations. How do these fit together for you? Like if you're working with someone and you're thinking they should go to this personal development seminar or they should do a family constellation, like how are you discerning the tools in your toolkit and helping someone find their truth?
Yeah. I feel like part of that is trusting myself as well. So I would say one of two ways. The first way would be the obvious that they found me through family constellations and they want family constellations, right? Or they found me through the core program and they want to do it that way. So that's the obvious. They've kind of made the
Yeah.
choice. When it's about me directing them, is I do what's called a discovery call with them, and
Mhm.
I look at what is their goals. Like, what is their
Mhm.
purpose for even meeting with me and talking with me? What is it that they want to achieve? And then from there, it's like I usually will get an intuitive hit or just know based on where they're at is that they would be a better candidate for one more than the other over like the process. If
Mhm.
someone already is a very spiritually inclined person and they do turn more spiritually, then it's like that is a very easy, the constellation routes. Where if you have tend to have the people who want the knowledge, who want the books, who want the analytical part of things, they want to break apart their belief system, well, then that's a very obvious to go to the core program, right? And so I usually do. I'm an advocate for here are your options with me, and here's my suggestions, and how are you feeling about it, rather than them not knowing the options, right?
That's helpful. So the more spiritual, more open they are in that way, constellations is going to feel more effective.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that it would feel more effective. Like, I actually believe this process is both and. So for
Mhm.
myself is that when I found Family Constellations in 2012, my son was 4 years old. And what I decided at that time, and so I'm already 12 years, or sorry, 6 years into my own personal development work. What I
Mhm.
decided at that time in learning that the lineage is passed through our DNA, like the trauma story is past, that I made a commitment that I'm going to clean up my family as much as I can so
Mhm.
it my son doesn't have to. And so every time I did a constellations is that at the very end we put my son in and we transferred that energy healing off to him as well.
Mhm.
Right? And so that was kind of where I decided that I was like, so if I didn't have the personal development, I would have my constellation process would have even taken longer, right?
Mhm.
And so that's what I mean. It's like it's definitely a
Right.
both and. It's like we have our lineage to heal if we're ready, and then we also have our personal experiences that have happened in this life that we can put some grounding on, some lessons on in order to create direction to move forward as well. And
Mhm.
so I do really see them as both and. It's just about which do you start with first.
Yeah. Do you think if someone goes through a transformational process on a pattern that's theirs, so like you gave the example, oh, we'll say it's theirs. You can correct this language. So the example you gave around your dad leaving and wanting to make up for it and then feeling like you weren't enough, um, that happened in your lifetime,
Yeah.
right? And then does it also trace back in your lineage? Like,
Yeah.
are there things we just created, or is it all ancestral?
I would say it's both again. And the
Mhm.
only way to know is to go and experience it. And so for me in that example is when I did that work in the constellation end and I went down, in this case, it was my mom's line of my mom not feeling good enough, her mom, my grandmother and great grandmother, is what we had found is it wasn't necessarily the I'm not good enough, but it was I'm not good enough for men.
Mm,
And so what it was, and I can share this because this was my personal experience rather than where my other
sure.
client, it wasn't mine. But what they had found was their emotions were so cold and turned off that the resonators, when they went in, it's like they were frozen in place and they just like couldn't move. And it
Mm,
was a complete lockup of their emotional identity. And
mm,
so they made themselves unavailable through this not enough message. And so that healing had to continue to move forward. Because if you even look at like what my mom created is so my parents' relationships when I was younger wasn't great. There were affairs. And so then I went into a relationship where I was the other woman for so many years, is that I just repeated a pattern.
mm,
And so it was both for me. And when we go in, is that for some people, it's like they need the whole lesson spelt out. Like I actually haven't experienced someone who just did family constellations and didn't do the logical work or the theory work behind the belief systems and their experiences to
mm,
get the lessons, right? And so I haven't done
mm.
just that route. But with what you're asking is, I truly believe it's both. It's that
Yeah.
these experiences that we have in our life is some pattern from the past, like our past experiences with our generations, but then they're also really real for us where we need to attach what I call lessons to those to move forward.
Mm. What does that mean? Attach lessons to those to move
Yeah,
forward.
like we, in the things that we would describe as um, like trauma that has happened in our life, is that I'm a firm believer that everything that happened to me happened for a purpose. Like there
Mhm.
was a reason that it happened, as challenging it was. Like I went through sexual abuse for 6 months. I went through a 7-year relationship with a man who was married to somebody else and I didn't know. And if I wanted to I have two options, is I can look forward in life or I can look back, right? And so when I'm looking, when I continue to, when I say like look for the lessons, it's like, why did I choose that at that time? And it has, and I have increased my value of life or I've increased who I am because of that lesson, right?
Yes.
And so it no longer becomes about being victimized by somebody, but it turns into this powerful experience of that happened to me and I'm better because of it. And I want to be grateful for that experience. And I want to be grateful that I participated in it, that I called that in for that to happen for my highest good. Right. And
Mhm.
so that, like, if we can just, I love listening to Stephen Jobs, and one of the commencement speech he said is always connect the dots. And so that's my version of connecting the dots, is that if we take time to reflect on what happened, and as terrible as it may have been, and we can connect the dots to where we are now because of it, is that's where we get the lessons. That's where we get the gratitude from these experiences.
That's so relate.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I believe that. Yeah. Um, so I like to ask if someone's listening to this and maybe they're newer in their personal development journey, or they don't have, like your family said, Heather, we want you to work on you. Maybe they don't have people in their lives that are giving them lifelines or messages about personal development, but they hear this. What would you say to them?
As far as if they haven't heard or haven't even thought of doing any personal development before.
Yeah, like, well, here's how I think of it is their intuition is starting to come online, but they're really nervous about following it or trusting it.
About trusting their intuition.
Mhm.
Well, I would say that in the times I didn't listen to my intuition and I knew I wasn't listening, is that my intuition had a way of getting much louder and
Mm,
making the lessons much bigger that I needed to take. And so it's almost like I can put it into like a metaphor. So I think Oprah even said this one time, is that it starts off with a raindrop. And then it's like if we don't listen to the raindrop, and this can be true of intuition as well, or even like following our purpose and listening, is that then the raindrop didn't listen. So then the storm came, and then it's like it's just so much louder. And then from the storm, it's a tornado. My experience in the times that I wasn't ready, it's like it was just a raindrop, but then something in my life brought the rainstorm. And if I didn't listen, then it brought the tornado. And in my experience, it got more painful to not listen to my intuition than it
Mhm.
is to just listen. And it does take practice, and
Yeah,
it takes almost like a leap of faith to trust in your inner voice and inner knowing. And I would just say, listen and try and see what happens because what's the worst thing that can happen,
right.
right?
Better than not listening,
It's
most
better than
likely.
not listening. Like it gets louder and louder when you don't listen. And even if it's like in my case with what kept getting louder and louder was my relationship with my ex that I wasn't listening to. Well, like the end of the story is like I was alone and pregnant, like and like I ended up getting pregnant with this man, and my son is now 17 years old. And had I not listened to who he was, it's like that what my louder version of the story would be is then who my son got entangled with. And so my son has a beautiful relationship with his dad because I trusted my intuition on what his strengths were and what his limitations were. And I enabled my son to enroll in his strengths, right?
Mm,
But then in the moments that I knew who his dad was, like for example, other women, is that one of my rules was he was never allowed to have my son around any woman but his wife. And so it's like that if I didn't listen to my intuition,
yeah,
gosh, that would have got so louder for me.
yeah.
That would have got so much louder. And instead, my son has like a beautiful relationship with his dad. I have a great friendship with this man now. I wouldn't suggest anybody date him, but he loves his son. So I don't need to penalize him for that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So, y'all, if you're loving this concept, definitely learn more. And Heather's provided a really cool gift called Unlock Your Family's Hidden Story to help you understand family constellations. So, it's a guide to help you really identify and heal these inherited patterns. And we'll put that link below. Heather, anything else? You mentioned that people can come learn from you once a month. Like anything else you want to tell people about what you've got coming up?
Yeah, so I'll give you the information about the date the next time that I have the master class where they can come and learn about the master class, and just learn about if family constellations is something that they would like to do. It is an online process, so it's one of the easiest modalities to get enrolled with healing. And if anybody's interested in the core program that I do, which is really the analytical part, the logical part, the people who want like the pen and paper and to like map things out, I can also share my next masterclass for that date. And so you can decide if there's either of those you're interested in learning about.
Beautiful. And then they can find you at the next chapter endeavors, which is tnce.ca
Yeah.
as well, just in case they're not clicking below. Awesome.
Yes.
Anything else you want to leave people with?
Nope, that's really great. I'm just really like I feel really honored, Darla, that you had me come and share. This was the first time I've shared about family constellations at this level, and I really am. Thank you for having me as a guest. And I love that family constellations isn't as well known as other things, and so I love that the message is being spread more about it.
Yes, thank you for
Yes.
sharing.
So thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Mhm.